Hello, you are welcome to the Messiah channel. We are an end time channel. Today we are discussing about the lost tribes of Israel. The 10 lost tribes of Israel. Where are they? Are they in America? Are they in Europe? Are they in Africa? And the argument is that the scriptures point to the fact that the lost tribes of Israel are in Africa and in the African diaspora. There are three major theories about the lost tribes of Israel, and we are going over them one by one. The first one is British Israelism. And the argument is that the lost tribes of Israel are in Europe, and according to this theory, Britain and the United States are in Bible prophecy, and the United States is Manasseh, the US is the tribe of Manasseh, and Britain is the tribe of Ephraim. And so you have the two tribes, one in Britain and the other one in United States. And the other 8 tribes who are lost from Israel, they are in Europe, northwestern Europe. And there is an evangelist, quote unquote, or a pastor, a theologian by name Armstrong, William Armstrong, and he proposed that, for example, Denmark is from the tribe of Dan, the people in Denmark. It's a very frivolous argument. Denmark means Dan's mark, the mark of Dan. And so if you look at the name Denmark, it means the mark of Dan. And so the conclusion is that Denmark is from the tribe of Dan. And the British Israelites also make very frivolous, racist arguments. And they say that the Europeans are the only race of people who descended from Adam and Eve, and non-Caucasian races descended from Satan, and so they are the seed of Satan. British Israelism resulted in the formation and establishment of so many churches in the United States that identify themselves as being from the tribe of Israel, and they were very exclusive. They didn't want to admit other people from other races. Armstrong founded a church, Worldwide Church of God, in 1933. Okay, the second theory is that the lost tribes of Israel, they are actually the Jews who now live in Israel. They were lost, but lo and behold, they have been found. You remember the state of Israel was founded in 1948, and people from all over the world flocked to Israel. And the argument is that presently Israel is the lost tribe of Israel, and the tribes have been founded and they have immigrated to Israel. To them, Israel has been regarded. Those people who believe that the Jews in Israel represent the lost tribe of Israel, they include powerful evangelicals in the United States. Pastor John Hickey believes that those people living in Israel now, they are the lost tribes of Israel. They have been regarded. Pastor Hickey believes that it was the finger of God that helped in the regathering of the Jews, the Ashkenazi Jews who are now in Israel. The third theory is what we call Black Hebrew Israelites. This is a combination of movement, people who believe that the blacks are the true lost tribes of Israel, and they are still scattered over the world. And if you look into history, the movement started in Chattanooga in Tennessee, not long after the abolition of slavery. Pastors, two of them, Crowdy and William Christian, and they actually were the leading theologians, arguing that the lost tribes of Israel, they fled from Israel, they settled in Africa, they were later sold into slavery, and they ended up in America and other parts of the world. How do we evaluate these arguments? And I believe that one way of evaluating this argument is to look to the Bible in order to decipher who are the lost tribe of Israel, where are they now? And so we are going to go through a series of scriptures to guide us to the conclusion who are the lost tribes of Israel and where are they found at this moment. The first scripture we will look at is Deuteronomy chapter 28. It talks about the curses that God imposed on his people, and as a result of those curses, the Lord scattered them to all four corners of the earth. Particularly important for our discussion is Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 68, where the Lord said that his people, meaning the Israelites, will be sent into Egypt again in ships. The question we ask ourselves is that the lost tribe of Israel, do they fit the scripture in Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 68? And I believe that the person who has done the most extensive research on that is Ronald Dalton. He is an African American, and he believes that the lost tribe of Israel, they are Africans, and he specifically mentions many tribes who are scattered over the world. And so he concludes that it is only the blacks, particularly those who were shipped to the United States, who will fit the scripture in Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 68. And if you want to look for the records, you will see that the slave ships are there. White Lion and Mayflower. White Lion, a British ship, was the ship that sent Africans to Virginia in 1619. And so you see that was the beginning of the slave trade that happened in the United States for over 400 years, fulfilling the scripture in Genesis chapter in Genesis chapter 15, verse 13 to 14, where God told Abraham that his descendants will be sojourners, foreigners, strangers in a foreign land for 400 years. And after that, the Lord will visit them. The second scripture that points to Africa is Isaiah chapter 11, particularly verse 11. The scripture says that in the end times, it will be the Messiah, Jesus Christ, Yeshua, who will do the regathering of the scattered children of Israel, the dispersed of Judah. It will be the root of Jesse, Yeshua, Jesus Christ, who will do the regathering. And the scripture describes the areas from which the scattered children will be regathered. And the areas include Patros, which is southern Egypt, and the places also include Cush. And most scholars believe that Cush is Ethiopia, but I believe that Cush is bigger than Ethiopia. And Isaiah 11:11 also talks about the islands of the sea, whether you're talking about the Caribbean islands or other islands from which African people were taken, to which African people were taken to, the islands to which enslaved Africans were kept up to this time. So Isaiah 11:11 talks about Patros, talks about Egypt, talks about Cush, and talks about the islands of the sea. Another scripture that is very, very important is Psalm 68, verse 31. And if you are an African or African American or a black Hebrew Israelite, or even if you are not, even if you're a white person, you should know the scripture in Psalm 68, verse 31. And let me read Psalm 68, verse 31. Princes shall come out of Egypt. Ethiopia shall soon stretch off her hands unto God. Here the scripture is talking about the future Jerusalem, where the Lord is saying that princes from Egypt will come to Jerusalem. And also Ethiopia shall stretch her hands unto the Lord in Jerusalem. It's a future prophecy that is going to be fulfilled, and it's talking about the children of God. And here there's no wonder that the scripture talks about two important nations, Ethiopia and Egypt. And if you look at the Bible, particularly the Old Testament, the Bible mentions Egypt and Ethiopia, and these nations are mentioned more than any other nation in the Bible. The Bible doesn't talk about Britain, it doesn't talk about Denmark, it doesn't talk about Scandinavia, it doesn't talk about the United States. It talks principally about Egypt and Ethiopia. And if you look at the original Bible, the Hebrew text, the Bible talks about Cush. The spelling is different. Kush. It's not Cush. And if you look at the original Bible, the Hebrew Bible, when they refer to Cush, Cush is a nation that included the south of Egypt, stretching to Central Africa and extending to the Red Sea. What I'm saying is that in the original Hebrew Bible, when the text talks about Kush, Cush, The area that it referred to is the southern part of Egypt and extending to Central Africa and extending to the Red Sea. And so that area is bigger than the present day Ethiopia. But nevertheless, the Bible is very clear that the scattered of Israel and the dispersed of Judah, they will be gathered from places, and prominent among those places are Egypt and Ethiopia and the islands of the sea, and princes will come from Egypt, and Ethiopia will stretch her hands unto the Lord. If you look at the history of Ethiopia, you will know that there was a marriage between King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba of Ethiopia, and as a result of the marriage, there was a prince, a king, Menelik. And so if you look at the Menelik dynasty, Menelik number 1, Menelik number 2, you conclude that yes, these were the descendants of King Solomon, that placed them within the bloodline, within the genealogy, within the lineage of the kingdom of Judah. And it's no wonder that even the government of Israel, the Jews in Israel, they recognize the fact that the Ethiopians are Hebrew. They call them Jews, but I would prefer to call them Hebrews. A lot of them were airlifted to Israel. It's very interesting to know that nowadays, for you to be included in the sons of Jacob, you have to be quote-unquote a Jew, and you have to meet other criteria. Particularly, you have to convert to Judaism, and they are also requiring that you do a DNA test so that they will trace you to the Jews who are living in Israel at this moment. And there are a lot of falsehood, there are a lot of misconceptions about this DNA test. If you are originally a child of Judah, why do you have to convert again to be a Jew for you to be recognized? We are looking at the scriptures that point to Africa, and let's also look at Zephaniah chapter 3 verse 10. The prophet Zephaniah said that beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, my suppliants, my worshippers will come and worship me. It's talking about a future event where in Jerusalem, the Messiah King will receive worshippers from his people beyond the rivers of Ethiopia. If you look at the old maps of Ethiopia, you will know that when the Bible talks about beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, it's talking about a large part of African land stretching from Ethiopia to the middle of Africa and to other places, including the place that used to be called the Kingdom of Judah, in a place that used to be called the Slave Coast. It was from this area that a lot of Africans were kidnapped, they were enslaved, they were captured, and they were sent on ships to Egypt again, to places including United States, to places including the Caribbean and other parts of the world. If you believe in the falsehood that has been propagated by the British Israelites, then you will probably believe that Britain is Ephraim and United States is Manasseh, and Denmark is the tribe of Dan. And so you conclude that, hey, Denmark, you are the tribe of Dan. But you build the Christian castle in Accra, the White House. You also built a castle in, or I will call it a slave dungeon in St. Thomas, and you call it the Red House. And slaves were taken from the White House in Africa, and they were sent to the Red House in St. Thomas. And so the Danish Virgin Islands came as a result of the Danish people engaging themselves in slavery in fulfillment of the prophecy in Deuteronomy chapter 20 verse 68. And so if the Danish people are from the Dan and the tribe of Dan, why did they participate in the enslavement of the lost tribes of Israel, including the tribe of Manasseh, including the tribe of Ephraim, including the tribe of Dan? We are looking at the scriptures, and we are saying that the scriptures point more towards Africa when we are looking for the lost tribe of Israel. Regardless of whoever tells you something, regardless of whatever they tell you, regardless of whatever they have written, you know they have controlled history, and so they control what is good and what is not good. And don't listen to what they tell you when they tell you about the lost tribe of Israel. Look at the Bible and look at Revelation chapter 2 verse 9 and Revelation chapter 3 verse 9. And the scripture in Revelation 2:9, Revelation 3:9 comes from the mouth of Yeshua, Jesus Christ, the Lion of the tribe of Judah. He said that there are people who call themselves Jews, but they are not. They are the synagogue of Satan. He said it 2 times in Revelation 2 verse 9, Revelation 3 verse 9. What does it mean? It means that in the end times, there will be a lot of false gospels, false teachings, and false writing purporting to identify who are the lost tribe, the lost tribes of Israel. And some people will self-identify as Hebrews. And Jesus is saying that be very careful, because there will be a blasphemy. People will call themselves as Jew, but they are not. They are the synagogue of Satan. And so, if you are a British Israelite, the question I ask you is that, where in the scripture do you fit in? Do you fit in Deuteronomy 20:68, where your ancestors shipped into Egypt again? And are you also listed among the places from which the lost tribes of Israel will be gathered from? Are you in Isaiah 11? The next question I'll ask you is that when the Lord talks about princes from Egypt and people from Ethiopia coming to give their worship to Him, are you included? Are you part of Ethiopia? Are you part of Egypt? And if you call yourself a Jew, be very sure you are, because the Lord is saying that there is a blasphemy of those who call themselves Jews, but they are not. And Jesus is also saying that when they say they are Jews and they are not, they are lies. And the book of Revelation is very clear that anything that is blasphemous will not enter the gates of heaven. Anything that tells lies will not enter the gates of heaven. And so this video is an attempt to fit the blacks, the African enslaved Africans, and the African diaspora wherever they are, fitting them into the scriptures, straight into the scriptures. And I conclude that when you're talking about the lost tribes of Israel, you should not be looking into America, you should not be looking into Europe, you should be looking into history and find out those who fit into Deuteronomy 28:68, and those who were shipped to all the four corners of the earth. And so you may be in America, but you are not a lost tribe of Israel. You may be an American, but you are not, because your ancestry and your history does not fit into Deuteronomy 68, Deuteronomy 28:68. The curses were not on you, and you have not shown how you fit into the scripture. And so when we talk about the lost tribe of Israel, the scripture is talking about Africa and the events that went on in Africa. After the children of Israel, the children of Jacob fled Jerusalem after they went into captivity. They fled and migrated to Africa, and they settled in different places, particularly the west coast of Africa. And they were subjected to the transatlantic slave trade that occurred in Africa, and against their will, they were shipped to other parts of Africa. And the scripture is very clear that when the Lord comes to regather his people, he'll be looking to Patros, he'll be looking to Cush, he'll be looking to beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, and he'll be looking to Egypt, and he'll be looking to the islands of the sea, and he'll be looking to the places where the ships of the Europeans took his people. And I believe that he'll be looking to Baltimore, he'll be looking to Memphis, he'll be looking to Chicago, and he's not going to rely on DNA tests. He's going to rely on the bloodline, because by a supernatural process, the Messiah himself knows those who are Hebrews by blood and by descent, by genealogy, and he knows those who are not. He knows those who say they are Hebrews, but they are the synagogue of Satan. Thank you for listening to this message.